There were two little boys at a wedding, and one of them turned to his mate and he sort of asked him this question. He said, "How many wives can a man have?" And his friend was quiet for a moment. He thought about it and he said, 16. 4 better, 4 worse, 4 richer, 4 poorer. How'd I go? Nick? Smile on your face? Yeah, nearly, right. Plus the one, oh, don't. I've got the mic, Al. Those wedding vows were first recorded in the Book of Common Prayer in 1549. That's a long time ago. And they also include these words that follow. It says, "In sickness or in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Isn't your wedding day meant to be a happy occasion? So why are we discussing financial problems, sickness, disease, like the death of someone you love? Why is that there? And those vows go on to say, according to God's holy law. Because God is found in reality. And it's a real true thing that walls will come in our life. They're walls, every one of those. And walls change us. They change how we do relationships, for better or for worse. It's why the writer of Hebrews, he said this: "Keep your eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith." Keep your eyes on Jesus. When I was reading that, Steve, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great this morning if we could sing that song, "Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus"? And when you sung that this morning, and I know you're emotional when you're singing it, I'm thinking, see, that's the power of the Holy Spirit. He whispers things, communicates things, encourages us to go certain paths, leads us. Without the Holy Spirit, none of this would work. Absolutely. And then the writer of Hebrews goes on to describe how Jesus faced the greatest wall in his life, the cross. And it says that when he got through past that wall, there was this joy that was before him. There was authority as he sat at the right hand of God. Wedding vows don't describe every wall we will come across in life. Walls come in all different shapes and sizes. But there is one wall that we will all face together. And you might not think of it actually as a wall. And people who don't know Jesus, they would never describe this as a wall. If you ask people far from God, is cancer a wall? Yes, it is for all of us. But there is something that people who don't follow Jesus would never consider was a challenge in their life. But for you and I, it is. And for you and I, as part of a church, it is. And this wall changes us and has the capacity to change churches for better or for worse. And when Jesus first introduced this concept, he shared it with his leadership team on the night when 2 of them would betray him, when his own people would turn against him, when he would go to the cross. That's when he shared this. And with God, timing's everything. And such was the impact of what Jesus shared that night on John, who was like teacher's pet, the disciple Jesus loved. This is John. And John was so impacted by this truth that he writes about it. And in the book of 1 John, Over 40 times, it's only 5 chapters, over 40 times he keeps referring to this. And I want to read that to you in a moment, but first I just want to make a little observation. Most of you at your homes have a TV, and that TV is in colour. But who in this room can remember when TVs were in... I haven't got there yet. Youth kids, put your hands down. Black and white, right? Black and white. Who can remember the year that it changed from black and white to... What year was it?
1975. March, actually.
March. How did you know that? That Italian brain of yours. Fantastic. That's true, 1975. That's nearly 50 years ago. Our world has also changed in that time. Our world no longer sees things in black and white, but we have now all these shades of grey. See, God declared that he created male and female in his image, in his likeness. And we've added some optional extras. Shades of grey. But see, when John is talking in 1 John, he's making some very black and white statements because he's describing God's kingdom, how the spiritual world works, how God's culture works in our lives on earth. He's not talking about Western culture. So I'm going to read this to you. So here we go. This is 1 John chapter 2, starting at verse 9. Anyone who claims to be in the light but hates his brother is still in the darkness. That's a very strong black and white statement. Verse 10. Whoever loves his brother lives in the light, and there is nothing in him to make him stumble. Hostage negotiators have a requirement. It's called proof of life. And that is what John is giving us. And then he goes on to verse 11. But whoever hates his brother is in the darkness and walks around in the darkness. He does not know where he's going because the darkness has blinded him. There is so much in those verses, but I just want to pick up on just one word for a moment. It's the ancient Greek word scandalon. It's where we get the English word scandal from. And most Bibles will translate it stumble. I'm just going to read verse 10 again. Whoever loves his brother lives in the light, and there is nothing in him to make him stumble. Scandalon is not just a trap or a snare that we stumble into or stumble over. It's actually the bait stick. It's the trigger mechanism that actually sets off the trap. When John the Baptist, who was Jesus' own cousin, who's known Jesus his whole life, when he gets critical towards what Jesus isn't doing and what he is doing, and he gets critical and he criticises Jesus to his closest friends, and he sends them to Jesus, and he justifies his criticism, or he justifies his offence with Jesus with criticism, because we do that too. When we are offended by somebody, when they don't do what we think they should do, or they do what we think they shouldn't do, we criticise because that justifies our offence. And Jesus, in response, sends a text message back to him. And this is what it says. It's in Matthew 11, verse 6. It says, "Blessed is the one who is not offended in me." Now, Jesus uses the word scandalizo, which comes from the word scandalon. Other versions say, "Blessed is he who finds no occasion to stumble in me." In John 1, chapter 2, John is giving us a way to wipe out that trigger mechanism, to actually be blessed, to take this trigger mechanism away and dismantle it. And it's love for those that you see sitting beside you, around you, in this room, those online. And I don't think I've ever seen that before to the depth that I've seen it until I was talking with Tracy a couple of weeks ago. And when I was trying to gather these thoughts together, and I'm looking at these verses, I'm seeing it through fresh eyes. That this trigger mechanism can actually be taken away. It's a brilliant strategy. It's proof of life. It's living in the light, and it's love. It's love for one another. About a week or so ago, I had a beautiful little pup, not quite as cute as yours, because mine have got longer legs and scruffy, and they're staghound pups. And I sold one to a friend of mine. He got one 2 years ago from me, and we've become really good friends. He doesn't know Jesus, but I really care about him. And he got this pup from me, and when he got home, he discovered that its bottom jaw didn't quite fit properly. And the next day it was really eating at him. And so he started driving back to Bairnsdale. He lives a couple of hours away. And he rang me and said, "Lex, I've got to bring this pup back. I hope you're not offended." And I said to him, "You couldn't offend me." I meant it. I said, "Honestly, you can't offend me. Like, I want you to bring it back." And when he got back to our place, I said to him, "I have a pup that I don't want you to have. It's just the best, one of the best little dogs I've bred, but I would rather you have it in exchange for this one than me keep it. Because I wanted him to have it more than I wanted to have it." And I discovered in that moment that there was no trigger in me to be offended by him returning my dog, because I love him. I care about him. He may never come to Jesus. There's no strings attached in this friendship. I will grieve over him if he doesn't. It's a powerful thing when we love someone, because it takes away the trigger mechanism of getting caught. And when I read those verses a moment ago about hating your brother, I know most of us gave ourselves a little tick in that box. And we tell ourselves, well, we don't. We love our Christian brothers and sisters. From a biblical perspective, hate and love are not emotions. They're attitudes expressed through actions. And John is describing a giant wall for all of us. But we will often think that it's really only a little hurdle you can sort of just step over. But it's a wall. Because we don't hate other Christians. And this is where our lack of understanding kicks in when it comes to this verse. Because until a week ago, I had no idea what the word that John was using that's translated hate, I had no idea what it really meant. And this week, as I went back and had a look, what does this word really mean? I was shocked. The word that's translated in our Bibles, hate, is the Greek word missio. Now, don't miss this. It means thank you, sir. Yeah. This word, ancient Greek word missio, it means, remember it's translated hate, this is what it means. To love someone. Now stay with me. To love someone less than someone else. To love someone less than someone else. It's making a choice in favour of one person over another. I've seen parents do that. It doesn't end well with their children. It's to esteem someone less. It's to regard them not as highly as you would regard someone else. And as I'm discovering what this Greek word missio means, I had this thought. In Luke 14:26, Jesus says this, if anyone comes to me and does not hate, missio, love less than me, family, self, hold me a little higher, in higher esteem than, and these are the words Jesus said, his father and mother, his wife, children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, it can't be my disciple. And I'm going, wow. Coral and I just watched the documentary on this cult on TV, and they were justifying their cult and how they treated family but Jesus said, unless you hate your family. And we have this wrong concept. We don't get it. According to the organisation Open Doors, in 2024, that's this year, somewhere in the world, a Christian every 2 hours will love their life a little bit less than they love Jesus. And they'll be martyred for that every 2 hours somewhere across the world. When Coral and I left Bairnsdale to go to Sydney to be involved in ministry up there for 16 years, we left Coral's mum behind and we left my mum and dad behind. But for 16 years, every school holidays we made the road trip from Sydney back to here and spent that time because we loved our family. It was a great pain to not be around them in their last years on life. And by the time we came back to Bairnsdale, all three were no longer alive. We weren't coming back to them, we're coming back here for you, for us. That's what Jesus is talking about when he talks about hating. He's talking about missio. It's loving him a little bit more than we love family and love our own life. And John uses this same word, and the context is a little bit different. In our village life, if you hear one side of a story and you react in a way that gives less grace to the other person, John calls that missio. It's hating fellow Christians. In God's kingdom, there's no such thing as neutral ground when it comes to our personal relationships with each other. There is no neutral. We're either living in the light or we're stumbling in the darkness. Blinded by the darkness is a word picture of sitting around a campfire. I don't know what it is about campfires, but you sit in one spot and the smoke comes, gets you in the eyes, and you shift to another spot, same smoke, same wind. And it's like it affects your capacity to see the smoke in your eyes. And that's the word picture of this blindness where we are clouded in our vision. We aren't able to discern. And John is writing to Christians and how we relate to each other. And he's writing to Christians that have a ticket to heaven. So this is not about a ticket to heaven. This is about living in light or living in darkness. And God measures our spiritual growth not by our knowledge of the Bible or theology, but how we love. That's how he measures Christian maturity. Hate, missio, is not the opposite of love. It's the absence of love. There are no shades of grey. It's either one or the other. It's just like there's either life or death. There's no halfway between life and death. Now, I love bragging on you guys in Redgum. I really do. It's one of the greatest joys of my life is bragging on the amazing people that make up Redgum. But there's a wall we all face. I have a natural bias to putting myself first. I can easily get caught up in criticism of others. But you know, I have amazing degree of grace and care for broken people. I don't criticise broken people. You can be a God-loving, Jesus-following, and you can mess up whichever you like, and I will give you all the grace in the world, and that's so easy for me. But there's a little select group of Christians that I keep my criticism, especially for them. And I'm not telling you who they are. And that is a challenge. Nick shared the challenge. We all have a wall. And when Jesus commands us to love one another, it's not an optional extra. And what makes it worse is that he placed the measuring stick so high. He says, as I have loved you. That's very high. I'll just finish with this thought. In Philippians, Paul weighs into this conversation and he says this: when you do things, do not let selfishness or pride be your guide, which is an attitude. Instead, be humble and give more honour to those than yourself. Do not be interested only in your own story or your own life, but be interested in the lives, the stories of others. Do you know how many times Coral tells me on the phone, ask your sister about her day? There are some things that come more natural, right? There's a show on TV called The Summit. Some of you may have watched it. Some of you probably didn't watch it. But it's based and set in New Zealand, and there's a group of people that have to get to the top of this incredibly high Alp above the snow line, ice. It's a very hardcore thing they have to do to get there. And it starts off as a group of people and ended up with just 3 people getting there. And they're carrying $1 million in cash in backpacks on the way there. And eventually there's a prize pool that's divided amongst the 3 of them. So these 3 people got there because of a team. No one gets there as an individual. They all get there only because of other people. And then one person at the end of the series was given the option of what to do with the prize pool of over $500,000. And they listened to the rest of the group. They weighed in on how it should be divided. It's still their decision, but they listened to the group. What shocked me was that most of the group told one person, keep it all for yourself. They only got there because other people carried them literally or got them there. They said, no, keep it for yourself. So this person, in the end, in the interview says, I tried to be fair. And they gave 100,000 to one person, 100,000 to the other, and they kept over 300,000 for themselves. And they thought that was being fair. Fairness is overrated. God doesn't do fairness. He does love. And in God's kingdom, that was hate, not love. And I was, I think, shocked at how our culture, which is reflected in the group, was saying, put yourself first, put yourself first, put yourself first. As I was gathering my thoughts for today, I came across a well-known theologian, and he adds his bit into this. And this is what he says. Hate is the absence of deeds of love. Love unexpressed is not love at all. Love has no neutral capacities. When it's absent, hate is present. But when we love, we take away the trigger mechanism of being offended and critical towards other people. I'm inspired by these words in 2 Samuel 14:14. I've just discovered this verse in recent times, and you're going to hear it again and again. I think it's one of the most richest verses in the whole of the Old Testament, and I've never seen it before until a few months ago. It says, we all die sometimes. And when I looked up the word die, what it means is it's to neglect wise moral counsel. What it means is we all mess up. We all mess up. And then it says, water spilled on the ground can't be gathered up again. Some of the things that we do have consequences that are so huge, we can't change them. We can't wind the clock back. And then it says, but God does not take away life. And this is the bit I love. He works out ways, not just a way, but ways to get the exiled back. That's what God does. It's 2 Samuel 14:14. God, and that was the Message Bible I was reading then, but it's rich in every translation. But God devises ways to get the exiled back. And Jesus modelled this with Peter. If you can think of a Christian leader that has hurt themselves or hurt a church through their actions, through their flawed humanity, if you can think of a Christian leader that's really messed up, if you can think of a Christian who's had a position of responsibility and they failed themselves and they failed other people and they let other people down, that's Peter. And to Peter, Jesus says this in Luke 22 and verse 32. But I have prayed for you, mate, that you would stay faithful to me no matter what happens. It didn't look like it for a long time. And then he says to Peter, remember this, after you've turned back to me and have been restored, that's two different things. After you've turned back and after you've been restored, make your life mission to strengthen the faith of your brothers. Anything less than that is missio. Love is so powerful. So powerful. Let's pray. God, I thank you that you just breathe your spirit into us to enable us to live where you put the measuring stick, where you could look at a failed person in your team who was so close to you, the inner circle, who completely messes up, and you don't just restore them, you elevate them to a higher position. I thank you that that's how you want us to respond. There's a process of coming back to you, there's a process of restoration, but to see the gold in others, to have a wonderment, a sense of wonderment in those around us, to express love in action, And through the process of that, take away the trigger mechanism that would snare us and take us to places where we would sit in judgment and criticise and get offended at what other people have done. It's so powerful. Your word is so powerful. It's life-giving. And I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. Steve, can you just sing that, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus, just that, and just you on your guitar? That's it. Just you on your guitar. That's how we do it. When it says in Hebrews, fix your eyes on Jesus, that's how we do it. And thank you, Sam, for getting us back online. Yeah.
You want to count me in, Jeff? Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace.
Living as God's kids and seeing Jesus, the wonderment, discovering what God has put within each of us. I think that's an amazing way to live, and we get invited to do that every time we bump into a Jesus follower, no matter where they are in their life, and we get to do that with our world around us. So